Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming. We've got the honor of having Dr. Felix Wohrle from DMG Germany here tonight. We're going to be going through a couple of different topics and just try and get you guys up to date on new technologies and the kind of benefits that products have. Dr. Wohrle has been a lecturer around the world, different topics. He's the head of scientific affairs at Dental Materials Gesellschaft and the head of education and training as well at DMG. I think I'll leave it up to Dr. to take it further.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here in South Africa too. And believe it or not, it's my first time, and I've already seen zebras, live zebras, not in a zoo, but in the wild. So that's an amazing experience for me, and I hope to see a little bit and get a better feeling of South Africa. Now, why with you today is we talk about how to simplify your life and how to make life less complicated. I had a conversation in the car with Dr. Benz's daughter, who wrote an essay on drowning, which her teacher found a little bit morbid, and therefore didn't get full points. So I'm a bit hesitant to say this, but actually, dentistry is one of the most stressful jobs. It has one of the highest suicide rates, at least in Europe. Maybe it's more relaxed here in South Africa. I hope so. So let's drop that suicide rate. And when we're talking about what you want, I would say what everyone wants. You want to be efficient in what you do. You don't want to waste time. You want to get accurate results, high-end, and naturally, we are all a little bit lazy. You want to get it easy. And this is exactly what we're going to talk about today too, about the science behind it and how that applies to the product and how can it help you get better results. And I'd like to start with an interesting question that I get a lot of times from dentists. And the question is there a universal cement? Admittedly, it says universal cement here on the Permacent 2.0, for example. But is there such a thing that this is the cure-all, the one cement that you need? And unfortunately, the answer is no. There's no real universal cement. It depends a lot of what you want to do with your cementation and what is important for you in these stages. So one thing is, for example, you will need very likely a temporary cement. So that's already a choice you're going to make. And that choice is dependent also on what you choose as a permanent cement later on. If you're going to use, say, phosphate cement because, let's say you're a bit thrifty, but more importantly, you want to be able to remove a restoration later on, then your choices are very limited. Not in temporary cements, because then you can take any temporary cement you want. But if that is a goal, then this makes it easier, but it makes it more difficult in other respects. And then naturally there's permanent cements that you would need. So again here, this is one choice that you want to make. And the question is, what is probably the best combination of cements? What is the minimum amount of materials? Because this is important in any operatory. You don't want to have too much stuff around because you have to train your staff on using that correctly. You have more inventory, you have to take a closer look at everything. So that is making life complicated. So the least amount of cements, that would be good. And as I said, temporary cements is one choice. And in these cements, naturally, it's very important to decide if you're going to use resin cements later on for any cementation or not. If you do that, then you want to go to a non-regional cement. And if you look at the requirements for a provisional cement, which is also partially true for any cement, is that, and this is the tricky part for temporary cements, on the one hand, you want actually to ensure that it keeps the restoration in. On the other hand, when you want to see the final restoration, it has to come off pretty uncomplicated, and that pertains not only to the provisional removal, it's also the residual cement removal. So excess removal in general for any cement is a big issue. You want to have that as trouble-free as possible. And there is, fortunately, cements that make it easier than others. This is a big thing too in your practice. We had a discussion just prior to you arriving here on whether to use a hand-mixed product or whether to use actually these auto-mixed products. And naturally, a hand-mixed product is cheaper, but it's not easier on the practice because it complicates matters. You have to have a trained assistant who mixes it properly so that you get the benefits. Here, you just put on a mixing tip and it mixes the material in exactly the right amounts that you want. You don't have waste on your mixing pad. There's people who say that the manufacturers earn their money with the stuff that's left on the mixing pad, not the stuff that goes into their tube or crown. And it's true. I mean, in a cement, you use very little material, but as nothing is worse, if you don't have enough material, the assistant usually mixes up too much, and you've got a bit of waste on these. So that is nice, and you can get a very easy and quick and reliable, and this is the important thing also. When you're dealing with dentistry, you're also dealing with reliability. You want your restorations and everything to last for preferably a lifetime or something. Well, maybe if you're a very business-oriented dentist, not a total lifetime. One-time replacement or something like this. So you can get this. And as I just said, eugenol or not depends on whether you want to use classical cements like phosphate cement. Phosphate cement is not a bad cement as such. It is not that you cannot use that for crowns and bridges. It works. There's crowns and bridges that have been in place 50 years or longer. It's a reliable cement. The one thing that's probably not nice, and I can talk out of personal experience, is post-operative sensitivity. It's almost guaranteed to give you post-operative sensitivity. When I was studying, a friend of mine was also studying dentistry, and in Hamburg it was like you had to bring your own patients for your exam. You wanted someone reliable to be there on the time that you were tested. So I had a bridge here, and on the cementation date, my friend asked me, "You want an injection?" I said, "How long is it going to take?" He said, "Oh, it's just a few minutes." So I said, "Well, let's skip it." That was a bad decision. That was a bad decision. Because this phosphate cement is really made up of very highly concentrated phosphoric acid, and that stings, I tell you. And not just for the day, that was for weeks. Once your pulp gets a little bit excited, anything is bad for the pulp. So you get all this. What is way better is, in terms of sensitivity things, is glass ionomers. And again, we can see since the introduction of the capsules, where you didn't hand mix the product, because that was one of the biggest issues, getting the mixing ratio right. When you did this, then you got a nice product that would work easily and reliably in your practice. So glass ionomers are a nice material too. They are harder to get off in terms of when you ever want to remove that crown bridge than the phosphate cement, but it can be done. But it gets actually a little bit more difficult. I don't know, probably you're not using any silicate cements anymore. These are considered only short-term cementation products. You're not using them. Okay, let's skip that. And Naturally, with cements, you can also distinguish between products that are largely retentive. Any cement has that feature. Any cement has a retentive feature element. And then there is the adhesive cements, which is basically resin cements. And they get a totally different, this is a totally different kind of animal. Retentive feature plus adhesive feature gives you an adhesion that is way, way better than anything you can get with the phosphate cement. Plus, there's no leaching out of the product. You can't dissolve these cements. They're resin-based. So these are long-term cements, and they're very tough to get off. And that mechanical retention that you're getting, that micro-mechanical actually, is basically the same that you have also with products like a bonding agent. When these resin tags go into the tubules, this is also retention. There's real retention on these things. And it's also on stuff like Velcro. The same thing, you get micromechanical interaction, they click together and they stick together. When Michael Buonaccore in 1955 published this paper, a simple method of increasing the adhesion of acrylic filling materials to enamel surfaces in the Journal of Dental Research, this changed dentistry because this made things possible that you couldn't do before. And bonding has evolved from 4th generation, 5th generation, 6th generation, 7th generation to, amazingly enough, products that don't need a bonding agent at all. We are talking about self-adhesive products. And not just in the cement line. Now you even got self-adhesive products in restorative products. So this is an interesting development. And these self-adhesive cements have become a real fad. This is one of the fastest growing group of materials that we have in dentistry. Ever since the introduction of Reliance Silicon, which is still the gold standard, you have to compare your stuff against that. We've seen that. And these self-adhesive cements, they make use of the same technologies that we have in bonding. They have an etchant part incorporated into it. And this is an important issue and to be aware of to make these products work properly. When I said it says universal cement on the package, it's true. They can cement almost anything. And the almost is they can't do veneers or stuff that comes close to veneers. Because in a veneer situation, the thing that you want is pure adhesion. You don't get much retention in a situation like this. So your adhesion has to be on the top performance level. And even though self-adhesive products have an adhesive part, it is not as high as you get when you're using a regular bonding agent with a resin cement. You get about half of the adhesion part, which means the closer you come in a restoration to a situation like this, let's say you're doing an onlay and that has very little retention, then you're coming close to this and you should really think about, do I want to cement it with that product? Because maybe I'm running into trouble. If I don't get friction additional to this, you may not have enough retention of this. But what makes it interesting too is that in the root canal, this is one of the most difficult bonding situations. There's very little bonding agents that perform really, really well in the root canal. And these cements now offer a possibility to cement posts in the root canal without having to go into that difficulties and thinking about the proper bonding agent. So that's, again, is really a point where your life gets a lot simpler because you don't have to cope with all of that. And the question actually is, still, do I have to bond a resin cement or don't I? And for this reason, we did a very interesting experiment. This is a CAD-CAM prepared tooth, or were CAD-CAM prepared teeth. And for these, we had fitting crowns. They were prepared, and cemented with 3 different scenarios. One scenario is to use Harvard cement, classical phosphate cement. Second one was to use Percem, which is a classical resin cement without a bonding agent. Context is the product that we work with. And then we had it cemented with a bonding agent. And this is the results. It's very interesting to see this. Not going too much into the numbers, but let's take the phosphate cement here with 43 as a standard unit. So what we can see is that the resin cement without any bonding agent already gives you 3 times as much in retention. And you get another double that when you're using a bonding agent. So 6 times as much retention of your crowns than you get with the phosphate cement. And that means you have a high reliability that your crowns stay in, but it also means that it's very, very difficult if you ever want to remove that. It's nearly impossible without damaging the restoration to get it out. Now, retention is not just based on the friction part, as I said. It's also based on the interaction between different materials. And when we have a crown or bridge, that can be out of a number of different materials. You can have gold, you can have gold-free alloys, you can have ceramics of various types. And the thing is that you can make a gold restoration chemically stick to your cement. There is special procedures like sandblasting and using a special primer to chemically bond to that high gold alloy surface. So then you get a real stress transmittance through the gold alloy via the cement, via the primer to the cement, to the two structure, to the bonding agent, to the two structure. And there you have it. But this only works for high gold alloys. It doesn't work for non-gold alloys, and that's an issue. And what about stuff like ceramics? Well, we all know that we can do something about ceramics. We can cyanate ceramics. And cyanidization is a very, very good means of increasing the attachment directly to the restoration. But, again, it doesn't work with everything. It doesn't work, for example, with zirconia. And there's very little products that work well with zirconia. So to give you a little bit of an idea of what zirconia does, can do, or can't do, this is a nice experiment here. So this is a porcelain fused to metal crown, and what they're going to do is put a sledgehammer to it. So just let that sledgehammer fall, bam, and not surprisingly enough, it didn't survive well. Well, this is to be expected. Total destruction. I mean, it's probably what you see in your everyday practice too. When you take a sledgehammer to a patient's mouth, this is the result, whether it crowns or not. Now, doing that same experiment with a full zirconia crown. So same height, same sledgehammer, wham! We should work on the sound next time. It's down there, but maybe we need to switch it on somewhere. Now, the one thing they're going to do here, and this is the new kit on the block, this is Emax, basically. Lithium disilicate. This is an in-between thing in strength between the glass ceramic and the zirconia. And that didn't survive neither. But if you look, and when they try to get out the zirconia crown, it's already pretty brutal. I wouldn't try this with any other ceramic restorations, but you can do it with full zirconia. Yeah. Just wedge it off. It's just embedded in the wood. So what? This is giving you an indication why they give you a lifetime warranty against breakage for these zirconia crowns. You can drive a car over these things, not all the time, not for weeks, but once, and it survives that. So you have ceramics that are very, very high strength. And again, in a case like this, you could use a phosphate cement to cement that. That would be strength-wise for the crown, okay. There's no issue using that. But you can't do that for other products. So when we look at the different types of ceramics, I basically want to group them in three groups. The aesthetic part, which is basically high glass content, which makes them this nice translucency and these nice looks. And this is the typical feldspathic and lucite reinforced materials. And then we have what's called structural ceramics. And this is the new kid on the block. This is low glass content. This is lithium disilicate. To some extent, even Inceram. I don't think Inceram is being used very much nowadays anymore, but that would be also something like this. And these structural ceramics, they tolerate being cemented with these self-adhesive cements. This works. You try to use aesthetic cements here with self-adhesive cements, they will probably fail and break, because the cement needs that absolute stress transfer that is only achieved if you silanate the ceramic, if you cement it with a resin cement, and then bond it to the two structure. This is what you need. And the high-strength ceramics, because they are so high-strength, they have no glass, they're a different chemical composition. This is aluminum oxide, this is zirconium oxide. Those tolerate basically any other cementation. But if I would ask you how do you feel in your guts, you would probably say, oh, I'm pretty uncomfortable thinking about cementing gut with a phosphate cement. It isn't even making the aesthetics so much look worse, because this is so opaque that you don't even see that. But normally you look for the highest bond strength that you can, and you can get a way better adhesion to the zirconia with some products. And then, also naturally, we have two structure. We're going to talk about how important enamel is when you're cementing veneers, for example. Because enamel is just your safety deposit bank. This is a reliable structure that you can always bond to. It's much more difficult sometimes to bond to dentin. It takes more care, it takes more knowledge, it takes better products to do that on the same level of reliability and performance than you do it with enamel. And the reason for this is basically the smear layer. The smear layer is created whenever you take a burr to the two structure. You get this mixture of debris out of meshed down collagen fibers, of hydroxyapatite, of your water spraying thing. And it's very weak. This is the problem that earlier bonding generations had. You just place something on top of it, it's going to fail, it's going to break, because the material itself, the layer is only 2 to 3 megapascal. It's nothing by today's standards in strength. But, and this is the good news, and this is what the current technology approaches focus on, it's very good to dissolve even in weak acids. And this is the two approaches that we therefore today see. So this is meant to be the smear layer on top of the dentin, and you see the tubules that it is including. And the one approach is just to take phosphoric acid, etch it away, and then this is your total etch technique. You're exposing superficial collagen fibers, you're opening the access to the tubules, that's it. The other way is what we're seeing with these more modern systems, like where you have a different etchant. It's not phosphoric acid, it's some other acid, typically an organic acid, and it's only partially dissolving it and incorporating it into the resin layer. And if you look at this, we see etch and rinse and no rinse systems in this. And the technology that is being used here in these no rinse systems, this is what you can transfer to modern cements like a self-adhesive cement, because it needs to take care of the smear layer, also partially. And this is an interesting molecule. It's one very special molecule that is used in the formulation of some of these cements. And basically it consists of three parts. We have that very easy part here with a double bond, which lets it polymerize and incorporate into the resin matrix. Then we have sort of a backbone, a linker, that connects it with the other part. And if you look at this here, this is your usual phosphoric acid etching gel. If I just overlay this, then you see, aha, this phosphoric acid is basically becoming a modified phosphoric acid, and this part is actually able to bond to zirconia. It's one of the few things, but that also means that when you clean a ceramic, and you use phosphoric acid with it, it's not a good idea to do this with this type of cement, because this will cover the whole surface and you have no bonding surface left for your special bonding molecules here in your cement. So this is an interesting thing, and this is basically NDP. You may have heard about NDP because that is the ingredient in Canada, for example, that makes it adhere to zirconia. So we can use this technology in our cement. What's also very important for me is to recognize that in order for the cement to do the self-etching and self-adhesion step, you need water. What did you call that?
Stardust.
Stardust, right. So if you think about stardust, as kids we never put this into water and got a fizzy drink out of it. We put our finger in it and got it on the tongue and enjoyed that bubbly feeling on the tongue. So the thing is that it comes in a paper bag, and there's nothing fizzing, nothing happening, and the reason why nothing is happening is there's no water. So if you over dry your preparations and you want to cement them with these new products that have these self-etching materials in them, they don't self-etch if you don't have water on the surface. You don't want puddles naturally, same as with bonding. You just want a moist surface. And if you have that, this part, the acid can be and it can give you that additional adhesion that you want in your products, additional to the mechanical interaction. And this is also, again, naturally something, because that is not as much as you can get with other options, like a regular bonding and a regular composite cement here. These situations are critical. So you should take care to use the cement appropriately in the situation that it was designed for, and then you get something very nice. And it was Permacent 2.0 here, for example, definitely designed to work well with zirconia. I can show you that because that's a really, really high bond strength. Vinylic Unicem is, as I said, is really the gold standard otherwise. So if you have another self-adhesive product, I would say on average it's performing less well than Vinylics. We are really proud therefore that we not only could cover that basic step, we get the same adhesion to non-precious metal, to other structures, we also get a way higher adhesion to zirconia. So this is one of the few products that is giving you this additional. Whether you need it actually is a different story. But there is situations where I'm sure you can use a higher adhesion to the product, to the zirconia. And that is what you can get in these situations. And for this reason, for example, on Joe Blaze here in the pearls for the practice said, if you're ever thinking about getting one product in your practice, this should be it. Should be Permacent 2.0. But again, I would say, think about what you want to achieve in your practice and what the cements are. then try to minimize the amount of products you have in practice. When they give you what you want in terms of performance, and then you've really done a first step into simplifying your life and decluttering your practice. So, by the way, you can ask questions anytime about anything here, and we are a pretty close-knit circle of friends. So, whenever you have a question, please do. Do you have any questions on that? Yes, please.
In your previous slide, you mentioned that cement for the equipment or your high glass
Yes.
content.
For the structural cements, yes. Or the no glass content, so zirconia, yes.
But then potentially what would you use in place of them?
There's not too many. A resin cement, that would be the other choice. But then you would need to go into the bonding issue for cements and coating with dual pure material. I'll show you that a little bit later when we talk about cold buildup materials. This is where the discussion originated. Then you see that it's not something that you can just say, oh, my bonding agent will definitely work with anything I can. I'm not trying to bond with it. It's not the case.
The issues I've had with cement
Yeah.
is when you do the things you're going to say, try to go efficient, try to make a lot of and those elements shine through. You didn't just come inside, I think, try to make it efficient.
All right.
About the things
Yeah.
I would have one, say, I have the fish shape and I want shape, and I have cement, different shape. And then when they come together, then I've got totally different
Yeah.
shape.
What I would say is exactly the point you're making here is you need an aesthetic. If you're that much into aesthetic, you need an aesthetic cement because these cements have very limited shape choices. And they have no option of letting you try how that would look like. So there's no trying pace, nothing that let you predict, except from a lot of experience, which also translates into a lot of mistakes and failures and disappointments. So these are difficult in a situation like that. When you're doing aesthetic restorations, you need an aesthetic cement. It's basically the way of this. All right. So let's look into something that I find really exciting, and that is having self-adhesion not just in cement, but in a restorative product. And this is the latest thing that is happening in restoratives. The application is pretty simple. Again, you need a little bit of moisture on the surface of the tooth. Then you just apply it. And then you can use it, for example, as a fissure sealant for small restorations, inchability, stuff like this. And the thing that is important in these products is that they all tell you to work it in. And there's a very, very good reason why we are telling you this. Imagine that these coffee beans here in this pot, these are the active ingredients that make the adhesion. And you want them to stick to the tooth structure, which would be our pot. Now, there's no way that they can just rush to the pot and stick to it, because this is a pretty viscous material. And that is the reason why you need to stir it. When you stir it, you bring them to the surface, they do the job, they stick to the surface, they stick to the tooth structure, and then make the rest of the product by incorporating it into the composite network adhere to the tooth structure. That's it. So you need two things. You need stirring and you need the moisture thing. And the amazing thing is that they are really, really good. Like what you can see here is, and there's not too many, there's actually only these three on the market right now. So what you see is the total portfolio of choices that you have in terms of these materials. Now I want to talk a little bit about statistics here. You see these A's and B's here over the columns. And what that means, anything with the same letter is statistically the same. So Constick is different because it has a higher bond strength on dentin than Veneers or Fusio. But Veneers and Fusio are the same. So this is comparing how does caustic, the self-adhesive Wohrle, compare to other self-adhesive Wohrle. And the interesting thing is that when you look now into this comparison, where caustic is compared to a bonding agent confused with a regular Wohrle, then you see these are all statistically the same. So you get the same bond strength out of a self-adhesive product, then you get with the combination, usual combination of a bonding agent and a composite. And I think this is really amazing because it's not only, you're not seeing this effect on just dentin, you're seeing it also on enamel. So same thing compared with the others, we get either a better performance or at least equivalent performance. And if you compare this to, and this is amazing because this is really difficult on enamel to get this performance that a bonding agent is giving you with a regular composite. So this is very nice. And you get a shape choice and also a really opaque white to cover up any discolorations in your restorations. And that makes it a very nice lining material also under a regular composite restoration. So this covers up the discolorations. This is giving you the adaptation and it's taking away the issue of bonding to dentin. It's very nicely radio opaque, so you can see that very clearly. And it has a nice fluorescence. Now, this is phosphorescence. When you buy a nice watch, I like to, when I travel, have a watch that I can just look at and that shows me the time even without switching on the light, because when I switch on the light, I get awake and then everything is gone, I can't get back to sleep. So I want a watch that has a very low phosphorescence. So I shine the light on it once, and then all through the night, I can look at that watch and see what time it is. It's also the stuff that you use for your kids. I don't know if you ever probably had that too in your kids' room, stars and glow-in-the-dark things, I don't know, dinosaurs and whatnot. So they're nice. So this is phosphorescence. You put light in, it saves the light, and slowly dispenses the light over the night time, for example. And then there's fluorescence. Fluorescence means you put in one wavelength and you get out another wavelength. Like this. If you look at these rocks under normal light, they look totally dull and uninteresting. They look like brown rocks. But if you put them under UV light, then all of a sudden you see this. It's amazing. They're not just dead materials. I was in Arizona, and if you're in Arizona, if you ever want to go scorpion hunting, what you take is a little bit of blue light, battery-powered blue light. You turn up these stones, and if anything rushes around and glows in the dark, it's probably a scorpion. So be a bit careful when you're trying to catch it. But that's how you catch these little critters. And you have naturally also a tooth-like fluorescence. It's not totally easy to get it totally correct. You can see here, in this case, the fluorescence is not prominent. You can overdo it, and then it's shining way too much. But it's difficult to get something like this where it looks exactly like the natural condition. We're very proud that we can achieve this. Now, both these products need to be refrigerated. And this is important, especially if you have a hot climate like here, because these products contain very highly reactive components. And if you don't store them in the fridge, they will overreact, so to speak, and then go bad. It doesn't mean that you can't take the product out of the fridge for a single second and, oh, wow, now it's going to decompose. No, it's not the case. You can basically use the product the full day in your office. It just means while you're not using it, put it in the fridge. And for the reps, don't drive with products like this in the trunk, park it in full sunlight, then it's definitely going off and not curing anymore. So this is what the product today needs. A lot of sophistication and a lot of performance, but it also needs a minimum of care, if you want to put it that way. Now I talked a little bit about, we talked just about the posts. So if you have nothing much left, you will probably need to do a buildup. I want to address everything here a little bit, buildups, posts, and the bonding system. And I'd like to start with a little video here. Oh, now we don't have the sound. Wait. I'll get a little bit of sound and we start the whole thing again. Let us do that. Otherwise, we're using my speakers here. Try it again. Okay. Yeah. No, it was correct in the location. No problem. We're trying these. Okay. Let's give it another. Oh, you're right. It's not working. Everything is on. Sometimes we get so disappointed with computers. This is full on. This is full on. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. No. Okay, we forget the video. We'll just continue on. Let's assume for a second that you're looking into a patient's mouth and you see a situation like this. It's bad, naturally, you know, as a core buildup is in place. And today we are seeing a few interesting trends in dentistry. One of the trends is definitely we have a trend towards more aesthetic. And more aesthetic means more full ceramic. And the other trend that we have, and that is very, very important for me too, is that we're trying to conserve as much tooth structure as is possible. So if you look at this, you actually have a choice of materials. Again, you could use, in a scenario like this, you could use, again, an amalgam, you could use phosphate cement, glass linear cement, you can use composite resin, bonded composite resins. And this is actually the one thing that is giving you everything. It's giving you good aesthetic, and it is preserving that little island of tooth structure that we still have there, because by the bonding process, this will be incorporated into the core buildup, and that will survive the cutting of the restoration. So what we want to achieve when we're doing a core buildup is basically what is called monoblock system. And it means that we want all the materials that are used in making that core buildup to behave like the structure that's been lost. And the structure that's been lost in this case is dentin. So the same flexing behavior, if possible, as dentin. And some other behaviors as well will come to that a little bit later. I'm not sure what the situation here in South Africa is. I was just on a lecture tour in Austria. And in Austria, people, in contrast to Germany, are doing a lot of these custom-made posts still. It's their material of choice. However, there is a risk incorporated with this. In Germany, the rule is if you can't do this within 24 hours, then you're running the risk of having a reinfection of the root canal, and that is naturally something that is very bad. So typically in Germany we are using either active or passive posts. And the active posts typically naturally are out of metal. So it's the screw. I don't know how when I work at home, I have bad experiences sometimes with things like when I want to put a screw into a board, wood, then it cracks because I didn't prepare the hole properly. The same thing can happen here. So if you put the screw in, already that process can lead to a fracture of the root. And this is totally counterproductive. You spend a long time using high-tech equipment to prepare the root canal and make sure that that root will survive. And then when you seed the post, you're cracking the root and everything is in vain. So this is a bad experience. Also, it's not very much in line with the aesthetic appeal. So if you have a metal post like this, you can use any color of buildup because this would shine through any full ceramic restorations anyway. And that means, okay, it's not bad, but also means that in this case, you're probably using the porcelain fused to metal crown on a case like this. So metal posts as such are very common and they are not bad. They have definite advantages. You can very clearly see them on the X-ray, and they are high strength, but it depends on the metal that you're using. Sometimes stainless steel will corrode. The oil environment is a very, very harsh environment. It's so corrosive. This is the reason why we're using these gold alloys and stuff, because otherwise corrosion is very common. But the main disadvantage here is the high modulus of elasticity. And high modulus of elasticity means that it's very stiff. So what happens if you put a very stiff post into a root canal and then you put and load it with a force? What happens is this is already transferred directly to the tooth and you can crack and fracture the root. Again, this is not what you intended to do. You wanted to conserve that tooth. So for this reason, people were thinking, well, if this is a problem, let's find something that has a lower modulus of elasticity that comes closer to dentin, and this is carbon fiber posts. And they're nice because they're easy to cut, easy to remove, and like I said, they got this elasticity modulus that makes them very attractive. On the downside, they are basically invisible on an X-ray, and under full ceramic restorations, it's not nice. Even though for a time there was the slogan, black is beautiful in the US, not under full ceramics. So, what about zirconia? Now, they are totally biocompatible. This is wonderful. This is what zirconia excels in. And they look pretty good. And they can be seen easy on the X-ray. But this stuff is very, very hard. It is very hard to remove, and it is totally stiff. So you don't want that. If it breaks, you have big troubles. For this reason, we are using glass fiber posts today. They have all the advantages to them. The main disadvantage is that some of them, not all of them, have a limited radiopacity. But they also have one thing going for them that none of the others has. And this is that you can directly bond to this glass fiber post via a silane layer. You don't even have to put it on yourself. The manufacturers very often do that for you. Like our posts, they are pre-silanated out of the package. And it's a bit like with this Chinese saying, you want to be like the bamboo in the wind. You want to bend, but not to break. And these posts are really very, very strong. We do courses at DMG, and I used to bet 20 euro that no one can break the post with their bare hands. I don't do that anymore since we had a Chinese visitor. I don't know how that guy did it, but he broke it with his bare finger. It must be some Kung Fu or Zen, or I don't know what. So I'm not betting the 20 euros anymore, but it is, up to now, this was the only guy that ever broke it. So it's really very stiff, very strong. And they have something going for them also in terms of, when we're talking about the monoblock system, what you can see here, this is a simulation. This is called a finite element analysis. And this is the natural tooth. And what we can see is that when we load that tooth, then we get a fairly uniform distribution of stress within that tooth. The red is a very high stress area, blue is also pretty high, and the green is obviously okay. Now, if we go to a metal post and look at the situation, what you can see is that we have very high stress buildup on the top, all alongside the post, and then, and that's the bad part, also at the apical end, where the root is the thinnest, we have a very high stress buildup there, and this can lead to these fractures that we see clinically in the teeth that have been restored with metal posts. And that picture here with the glass fiber post shows a fairly similar behavior in terms of stress distribution as does the regular tooth. So this is something that we want to achieve. Do you have CRA here? Clinical Research Association? Now they are only called CR, but that part is CRA. I like CRA. They are headed by Gordon Christensen. And Gordon Christensen and CRA are situated in Provo, in Utah, in the USA. And they are all Mormons. And the good thing about Mormons is they are not allowed to lie. So everything they say, they tell is the truth. Very easy. But this was an interesting piece of research where they looked into is there a shift, and should there be a shift away from metal posts? And I think one of the main things is naturally, they totally saw this too, to see how much force do I need to break a core buildup in the post. And I need to look a little bit into statistics here as well. We already talked about statistics in A's and B's here. This bar, any of these bars that covers these areas here, all these combinations here are statistically the same. So if you look at this here, this goes from about 400 to around about 500 megapascals of strength to break it. And if you look what makes up this group, there's everything in there. This is a glass fiber post, metal post, glass fiber, glass fiber, glass fiber, glass fiber, titanium post, glass fiber, carbon fiber, ceramic post. So everything in this group is statistically the same. It doesn't matter whether you use a metal post, a glass fiber post, or a ceramic post, or a carbon fiber by that. They all perform very, very well. They withstand very high loads and before they fracture. What is interesting here too is this one thing here, and this is a tooth with a core built up only. So, and this is a big discussion we are having today in terms of being minimally invasive and taking away tooth structure. Our students don't understand that at first. They think a post is there to reinforce the tooth. But it's not there to reinforce the tooth. It's there to give more retention to the core buildup. This is the only purpose. So when you have enough walls to bond to, when you have enough structure and the proper combination of bonding agent and core material, you don't actually need to place a post. This is dogma, this has been overcome. And if we look at the differences here, then you can see this is about 15% that you're gaining in terms of fracture load that you can put onto these. But the tooth has not lost any structure, and the tooth itself is strong. So this is an interesting thing to look at, restoring teeth with a post. And the results are very, very clear too about this study. This is only part of it. The quintessence was that whenever you're using metal posts today, you should switch to glass-lined posts. That is the advice you get from CIA out of this. And to just reinforce this a little bit, there's another piece of research that also confirms that when you're using a composite restoration, which is a composite buildup, and a proper bonding procedure that worked with this specific combination, then that was almost as strong as the unaltered tooth structure. So that is very, very good news. You don't absolutely need a post, but you have then to make a good decision clinically. Is this going to hold up? Do I have enough bonding surface for my hole buildup? And if you drilled into the hole and thought, okay, I'll get more core material into the tooth, that made things worse. So don't remove tooth structure. Either you go this way or you go the way of the post. And the thing that most people are concerned when we're talking about root canals is really, how can I ensure that it stays where it's meant to stay, that it stays in the root canal? And one thing is really that silanization of the post. That helps. That gives you about 1/3 more of adhesion in the root canal. And if you don't buy the post pre-silanated, it's a pretty simple procedure. You can do it yourself. You just mix up the silane, put it on. It's about a 30-second thing, dry it off, and you have a real plus in the adhesion that you're using there. So it's definitely worth doing, and this is why we decided, well, if it's worth doing, then why should we let you do it? We can do it. You get a pre-silanated post that is already ready to be seated. So what we teach the students is really that they also think the bigger the post, the better, but it's not better if the root canal is so big that you can place a bigger post, do it. It needs to fill the root canal. But it doesn't mean, oh, take the biggest drill you have and drill into that tooth structure. Any loss of tooth structure is bad. So the smaller you can make it, the better. And you should see that you have about 1 millimeter of residual dentin thickness around it. If you cannot ensure this, it's not a good survival decision for this tooth. It's probably not going to work. To ensure that you get this, we use a tapered post. And you can again say what you want about tapered posts. It's also a decision about your cement at that stage. Say you have a phosphate cement and you want to use it with a tapered post. This is not such a good idea because the phosphate cement is not inherently very strong. So when you place a tapered post like this, it can crush the cement, and then you get what's called a wedging effect. It's like putting a wedge into the wood and then cracking that tree. It's the same thing. So you're running a high risk of fracturing the root with this. But if you're using a resin cement, that is strong enough. Wedging doesn't happen. Everything is cool. Now, we also want at least 4 millimeters of apical seal, but that's a given thing. We're not discussing this. What's important too is about when and how you cut the post. The preferred method is to do that out of the patient's mouth with a diamond wheel. If you do it in the patient's mouth with a burr, diamond burr, it can be done, but if that cement is not completely set at that stage, you're basically shaking loose that post and you're losing all that good adhesion that you just established. So that's a very important thing. If you do it this way, let it cure completely and then you can do it. That's not a thing you can't do, but you have to take into account what state the cement is in as you do it. And I want to talk a little bit about the cementation procedure. This is a video here, and it's a real root canal that we drilled with our post drills. And you can see that the tip that we have in the system, and it doesn't matter whether it's the Permacem 2.0 that has an even narrower tip, a metal tip, or this one, you can reach really deep down, you can fill that very quickly and efficiently, and then you can seat your post. So this is something that helps you in establishing this. I want to show you this a little bit more clearly. So this is the usual comparison here that we have between a regular tip that is used for the core buildup and the endo tip. The endo tip is much sleeker and longer, and you can get that also for the cartridge, or you can get it with the Permacem 2.0 in an even thinner version than this one. What you want to do also is to create the ferrule effect. The ferrule effect means nothing else but that the crown or bridge, whatever, rests about 1.5 millimeters in the tooth structure. Because if it rests here on this interface, then you will transfer any stress directly to that interface, and that, even though the bond may be good, long term you will weaken this. This is the crucial part here. So if you're after a good longevity for your restoration, you will do this ferrule preparation to make sure that the survival rate of your restoration is enhanced. And I can lecture. This is no problem that we don't get this out. Gordon Christensen talking about something that is interesting, because we all learn things in the studies, and sometimes we later find out, oh, there's a better way of doing it, or there's a better understanding of how that works. So I don't know what you have been taught. How deep should you seat a post? Probably 2/3 down the root and 1/3 for the crown. At least that's what I learned. But it's no longer the case. Today, clinical research clearly shows that when you're doing it with glass fiber posts, so this is the important thing, this only pertains to glass fiber posts, then you would only seat it to about half of the bony supported structure of the tooth. And that means that you don't seat it as deep as you used to, and it has advantages, because it means you're not drilling as deep into the tooth, so you're reducing the risk of drilling through the tooth, and you're removing less tooth structure this way. So Gordon is always right. This is the new teaching. Naturally, you do this because you need a core buildup. So let's talk a little bit about core buildup materials. Gordon again has all of these wonderful features here that you want in core buildup. Self-cure, dual cure, radial paint, you want it to be stable, colored so that you can actually distinguish, is this tooth structure or is this my core buildup, and easy handling. Any of you already using Luxicor? So, what is your experience? Does it work fine? Does it handle nicely? Yeah? Ah, you are doing it. So?
It looks well. What you probably have is
your stackability, you want? Okay. Okay.
Like a little, I had a core buildup that she just packed together.
Okay, that's a very good point. I can give you a solution to your problem. Do you know these little plastic cups that are called core formers? Do you ever use them? I checked. Maybe I can show you a little video that shows the use of these core formers, because that is exactly what you would have, and that makes it so easy. It's a what we call cinch. Yeah. The reason why we cannot make it that stackable and that firm consistency is that we also indicate it as a cement for the post. And that means if we make it more stackable, more viscous, it doesn't get the low film thickness that you use for a cementation thing. So, but we come to another point, and I'd like your opinion on that one in a bit. So we got, since 2003, 5 stars from reality. And 5 stars from reality may not mean so much for you, but it means a lot for us. Because it means a recognition of something really well done. It's difficult to get these 5-star ratings from reality. There's only one 5-star product in every category, and we want that for Luxembourg. So let's look into the situation here. Let's see how that works clinically. So in a situation like that, what you would do is place a matrix band, then do an etch and bond procedure, whatever your specific bonding agent requires, then probably light cure the bonding agent, and then apply the corbel. And this is a situation where occasionally I used to get calls from dentists in Germany, you know, they're sometimes very meticulous, and they call me and say, when I look with my 8 times magnification loops, I see sometimes a crack on that interface here between the tooth and the corbel. There's actually not a crack. What happens is this. They apply the core material, and it's a flowable. It's not water. So it flows towards the matrix band, and what it does on the matrix band is this, it curves. And then when you cut it later on, it looks like, when you cut that curve, you see the end of the curve, so it looks like a crack. So what we want to do to avoid this is, like syringing a preparation, put the tip at the interface between the tooth and the matrix band and apply the material there, and let it flow towards the middle, and that eliminates that issue. I always tell the dentists, if you have any troubles, again, give me a call. Never received any further calls, so that really solved the issue. Okay, so you've filled out everything, and now, because this is typically dual cure, and ours is definitely a dual cure material, you can light cure this and then remove the matrix band. And this is probably the critical moment now. You want to cut the preparation. So when you do this, and those who are not using this, you all probably know the situation. Let's assume half of this tooth is a core buildup material. Let's assume it's phosphate cement. So I'm starting here in the tooth structure with my drilling, and because it's dentin, I use a certain amount of drilling, and I go zzz, and then I come to this interface with the phosphate cement, and I go nick into the softer material. It's the same when I use, say, a composite material that did those odd D4 shades that I never use up. I use that for buildup. It's perfectly fine. It's doing great. But it's a material that is used, or meant to be used as a enamel substitute. It's a filling material. So when I cut this and I come to the interface with the dentist, I nick into this. It's probably experience of your life. And what I would like to ask you is, how does the cutting feeling feel with Luxacore?
Old generation was you don't have soft, but I can manage it because I have a bird that has a stop.
Ah, okay. So you have this pin, the guide pin. Okay. But it cuts nicely, doesn't it? And this is the part where we got the 5-star reality rating for, because it handles so nicely and solves this issue with cutting into it. Now, that is right. So it's good. We have a high-profile product for us, like a good German car. Why do we have another product like Luxacore Z? And which for us is like the souped-up model. And I want to show you a little bit about marketing at that moment. So we have 5-star rating for Luxembourg, and in Germany we have a competitor here. This is Velber, probably not big here. Voco. So it had 417 megapascals of compressive strength, and Luxembourg only had 290. And that was statistically different. So the marketing department said, how can it be that we have the best core material as per reality, and we have a compressive strength that sucks? So the R&D department was forced to do something about it, and they improved the compressive strength here to 380, and that, believe it or not, is statistically identical to rebuilder. So they were happy about that. Now the thing where I as scientists say is all good and nice, but it's stupid, is this one here. This is direct. This is a direct filling material. It's directly exposed to the chewing force. It's not under a crown or a bridge. And that clocks in at about 200 megapascals. So what does that tell you? Does that mean that direct is a bad filling material? No. Most of the filling materials are in that range, 200, 250 megapascals. It tells you that the 200 megapascals that you have here is probably overkill. It's like having 20 atom bombs when you can rip the world apart with 5. You don't need it. And frankly speaking, when I ask dentists, have you ever seen your core disintegrate because of a compressive load? Never. Ever. So it's total bullshit in a way. But you're made to believe that this is an important feature of the product. What is, however, an important feature of the product is to recognize that you have different cutting behavior between relatively soft dentin and very hard enamel. So this is important because this directly affects how your preparation looks like. Whether you cut into the tooth structure or whether you cut into the core material. So we did an experiment and measured. Can you actually measure how the cutting feeling is? And you can. This is the research out of a PhD thesis at Hamburg University. So this gray bar here, this is how dentin cuts. And then we have gold alloy, amalgam, we have phosphate cement, glass enamel cement, and this group here, this is all composite core buildups. And the one that is smack dab in the middle of how it cuts or feels to cut, dentin, this is nice. So we felt pretty good. But again, some dentists told us, I can still, when I do this, feel a difference in the cutting behavior. So this is where the R&D department concentrated on. And if you look at this now, dentin, Luxembourg, there's absolutely no difference in the cutting behavior. I think you tried everything, you're using everything. So what's your opinion? True, false?
I will never believe
Are you using Luxembourg or Luxembourg?
The older one.
Okay. So, if I send you a Luxembourg, would you try and give a feedback here and say whether it's better? Okay, I'll do that.
Is there a lot of difference between normal composite and the other? Once you use the normal
Yeah.
composite,
You can use normal materials. As I said, you have filling material that you have lying in the drawer and you want to use it up. It's perfectly alright. In terms of, does the core work? Yes. In terms of how nice is it to cut it, it's difficult. That is the part where the composite core that you're doing with the filling material will withstand everything as well as this one. There's no difference here. It's just that it's way harder to prepare properly on this one. It takes longer, yeah. It takes more care because you're not pressing that hard to avoid that leaking into dentin. And especially having a closer look at when you come into this area that you want to be more careful and stuff like this. That's exactly the point. So we are going full circle to coming, I want a time efficient, accurate, and high-end preparation. And this is exactly what, in this case, the material is supporting and giving you, where, because the material is working for you versus you working against the material.
Just a question of flowers. And all the hardness and that other thing.
Yeah. I just feel it's way easier to do dentistry on that level. It's you know, it can even be fun again. Now, the important thing about it too is in theory, bonding anything is easy. And I have a little video, because we don't have the sound, I'll do a little bit of voice over. So, one drop of super bond, extra strong, sticks in seconds and forever. Wood, metal, paper, plastic. Go on. And then you hear the clock. But that is in quintessence what we would like our bonding procedure to be. Quick, fast, efficient, bonds anything. Enamel, dentin, light cure, dual cure, self-cure materials, we don't care. Now, this unfortunately is not the reality. I don't know if it happens to you, but in reality, sometimes you see this. You take the impression, your carefully crafted core buildup sticks in the impression. Oh, yeah. So what are you thinking? That damn core buildup didn't work. But it is not the damn core buildup. It is the damn bonding agent. And it's a real issue. Again, CRA looked into this, and they called this piece of research, which is pretty intense here, core buildup and adhesive incompatibility. So, oh, I can't open this, well, then I have to tell you. What they looked at is 24 adhesives and 7 different core buildups. And they checked the compatibility and which one works. And so they have basically 3 groups of materials. They have a small group where the bonding agent works with any of these core materials. Then they have a group which is so-so, where sometimes it works well with one specific product, but not so well with the rest. And then they have a group where basically the result that we saw before is going to happen, no bonding or very low bonding in this interface. And the important message that you get from this piece of research is that you have to be very careful in selecting the right bonding agent for your core buildup, or which is exactly the same problem for your cements. Any dual cure and self-cure materials. It's very important to choose wisely so that the bonding agent works properly together with this product or this product range. And there is, if you look at how easy is it to find the right product combination. If you're doing light cure materials, basically you can do mix and match. It doesn't matter. At least in the shorter term, you can use ivoclar-vividens bonding agent and 3M SPs composite, doesn't matter, you can do that. If you're going into core materials and cements, your choices get a little bit more limited, but you still have a good choice. You can still select from various manufacturers where you like the bonding agent, and you can select another cement or core buildup, and that will work. But in the root canal, you're very limited. There is a handful, and I mean it, of products that work well in the root canal, because the one challenge that you have here is that you cannot light cure properly in the root canal. So you need a real blue cure material. And I want to show you, therefore, what the bonding agents and the combinations that are used in the root canal, what the challenge is. So the one thing that they all have in common is that they all use a phosphoric acid etch, which means if I etch, I have to rinse, and I have in this moment a lot of water in my root canal. It's basically filled with water. The question is, how do I remove it? You can use paper points. Paper points work pretty nicely, but there's an even better solution. The better solution is this brush here. We call it an endo brush. It comes with our bonding system, the Luxabond. What you do is, you run it in your root canal, take it out, put it on a paper tissue, and the paper tissue will soak up the excess water from the brush. So you get a wet spot on that tissue. And you do this until you don't see any wet spot on the tissue. And what you have at that moment is really the perfect moisture content on this root canal. So this is what we want to achieve. And it's nice also because you can use that same brush then to apply, in our case it's called a pre-bond, but the others have this too, a polymerization accelerator. This is what the take-home message for today. Polymerization accelerator, which means it accelerates the polymerization of anything that it comes into contact with. So if you now mix the bonds components, in our case A and B, and you apply this mixture, there's the polymerization accelerator lurking and waiting to accelerate that bonding. So you apply this with a new brush, and you mix it with a new brush, and you remove the excess in exactly the same way. I call it the brush and tissue technique. And you want to do that fairly swiftly, because if you wait too long, then the bonding agent will actually run down into the root canal, and then it will block your root canal at that stage. So you don't want that, you remove it, and now, fortunately for you, everything is cool, you have all the time in the world. You can do whatever it takes, you can cyanate the post, whatever you do, however, you clean the post. It's very important to clean the post, and cleaning the post means nothing else but using an alcohol wipe and wiping the post down. The reason is that in the process that how we make it, there can be dust on the surface, and it's not good to bond to dust. So you remove that, you clean the post, now it's time for the cementation. And there's basically three ways of cementing the post. There's the cement on the post, there's the cement in the root canal, and you can do both. The discussion is really still on what is the best method. But this is definitely not a good method, because if you're using a lentillo, then first of all it takes a bit of time to bring it down to the root canal, and then you have your polymerization accelerator there lurking. So it's waiting to shorten the polymerization time. And this is what you see with all of the products that are used in the root canal and work fine. So they're shortening your working time, and it's considerable. With Luxacor, you have a normal working time of 1 minute 45, so plenty. You can do anything you like. But if you're using it with the Luxabot, you have a working time of 20 seconds. Okay, I can see a little bit of concern in some of the faces. So let's do a little experiment. I will not talk for 20 seconds, starting now. was 20 seconds. So 20 seconds is short, but it's longer than we tend to think it is. However, what it means is that if you try to get the cement down in the root canal, the second it touches the walls and gets into contact with the polymerization accelerator, you have 20 seconds. And if you place the post later than that, it may already start to gel up. And a gelled up cement is not giving you the same adhesion as a very nice floral cement would. In a worst case scenario, you don't even get it down because it's so gelled up that it doesn't flow around and you can't make sense of it. So this is difficult. And basically it also means that in order to do it, you need to be pretty much organized. You can't go, nurse, I'm sure we had the post right here a few seconds ago. Where the heck did it go? Then it's basically over. Then you messed up your 20 seconds. So but let's assume you did everything right, and you can seat the post here within 10 seconds, no problem. Then you can line cure it, and then because you naturally also bonded the coronal aspect, you can just continue with the buildup. You don't even need a new tip, right? We had a discussion about tips, so no new tip here. It's all within the working time. And then finally, you do that preparation and ensure that you get a thorough design here for this, for the longevity of the product. The nice thing about this is that this will give you very, very good bond strength here. Luxopost showed highest bond strength. So this is a study from the University of Erlangen and the University of Health Science Center in Texas, Houston. It was a pretty difficult thing because they always looked at 3 different parts in the root canal. How good is the adhesion there? And they compared a lot of products here. So actually, what we can also see is if we compare this to as a different part of that study, if we compare this, then we are actually comparable to Panavia, and that's a very good thing. You get a very solid cementation, very easy, plus the core buildup. So you have one material that does 2 jobs for you, and again, that is sort of declutterizing. Is declutterizing a correct term? Decluttering? Decluttering, okay. Your drawers in the office, and that's the thing that we'd like to see. Now, I have one more part, and you put down you wanted a break, but it's up to you. What I want to show you here is a very intriguing method of achieving a veneer preparation very easy and in a minimal invasive way. And how that works is with the help of temporaries.
Next to me in the
The reason I'm showing you this video is not because I think it is really funny, but because this is one of my core beliefs. My core belief is that nothing, whether it's a private or your business life, is as bad as expectations that have not been met. So that means that in a situation where, especially in aesthetics, we're dealing with expectations from the patient, you either meet or excel in these expectations, or you need to set the expectations level right. There's no other way of getting out clean in these situations. And let's look at a situation like this. So, what do you think? Would David, this is David here, have a chance of being your boyfriend? Right, okay. And I can understand that, probably because he has all these diastemas, he has these discolored teeth, not to talk about his hairdo. But what about now? Okay. Yeah, same person. It's hard to believe, but it is the same person. And what has changed is not only the hairdo, the smile has changed, and what has changed also that insecure look is gone. This is a totally different person. And it's important to see that in today's world, the smile is very potent, it's very powerful. People who are good looking get better along with life, they get easier new job, they get better pay. So actually, doing a smile makeover like this may be a real good investment. And let's look at this here. This beauty queen won in the UK what's called an extreme makeover. I don't know if you it's called the same? Extreme makeover? Okay. So you get a complete workover, new hairdo, new style, new personal trainer, but you also get a new smile. And one of the big things, or the biggest thing in this whole series is actually when they do the revealing, when they step on the stage with their new outfit and their new self. And this is her at her revealing. And you can say what you want. I mean, hairdo, no glasses, but the biggest impact is the smile. And what most people don't know in these TV series, this is TV, it needs to be fast. So these people typically are in their temps. It's not the final restoration. And no one notices it because it's so close to the real thing. They get the final restoration. There's not an issue. They're not intense for the rest of the life. But this, for example, has changed her life completely because she hadn't eaten an apple in 4 years because she had these loose teeth and whatnot. So this is making a tremendous change. And because of this, it's important to get a preview, not only for you, but also for the patient. When I start this, or when we start this, can we give you and the technician an idea of what we will end up with? And you can't do that. So you can't, and this is one of the few things where you can't in cosmetic dentistry, cosmetic surgery, where you can't actually simulate this. You can't predict what it's. And this is giving you a lot of safety and reliability in doing it. At least it can be. And we all know the typical task of a provisional. Sure, it needs to give you protection from external influences and stuff like that. You want to be able to do everything you could do with your real teeth. And it's important to preserve, for example, space in an implant case so that the antagonist doesn't grow into that hole that you have there. But one thing that doesn't play a real role in normal everyday dentistry, but becomes extremely important in aesthetic dentistry, is this, simulating the result. And with this simulation, I'm going to show you a little bit what you can do more and why this is so important. And I've already mentioned the two driving forces in dentistry is aesthetics, okay, but it's also maintaining tooth vitality. And with that, also trying to be minimally invasive, to cut away only the minimum amount of tooth structure. And then we can actually ask, so is veneer a minimally invasive procedure? Yes and no. If we look at veneers as such, it's definitely invasive. But if we compare it to the alternative, like having a crown preparation, then it's minimally invasive because you only cut away a quarter of the tooth structure that you would cut away from a crown. So, In a typical situation where you do want to do veneer, the first step is probably to get a wax up from the lab. The lab creates that vision. This is how it should look like in the patient's mouth. This is what we're going to strive to get for. And the nice thing is now that you can just take an impression of that wax up, put laxative in it, put it in the patient's mouth, you have a mock-up. You have a simulation of the real restoration, like it's going to look like finally in the patient's mouth. So this is all, what most people don't know is that you can use that same mock-up, that same technology to create a cutting template that will allow you to minimally invasively cut the preparation. When you use that, then you have not only the least invasive preparation, you also have safety and reliability in guiding you to the right preparation. And then it's the usual thing, you take an impression with honeycomb, and you have a relaxed cementation with VT, which unfortunately today, due to time limitations, I can't show you, except that you want to stay longer, then we can discuss this. Well, this is the way what I'm going to show you, and I want naturally to concentrate here on this step, because this is what you probably at the moment are not doing. And when we're doing aesthetic dentistry, it's also very important to recognize that the ideas of what beauty is and how it should look like can be very different between you as the dentist and the patient. They can have totally different ideas. So one of the most important things is to ask the patient, what do you envision? What is important to you? What do you want in each other? It's sometimes difficult for a lot of dentists. A mentor of mine had a very nice sign here. He made this sign here like of a dog. Prick up your ears, shut your mouth. This is what you do at that moment. You listen, do not speak. I have a little video, and this is probably going to sound. So, as they say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And the important thing is, a friend of mine, Professor Barman, comes to in his waiting room, and there's a guy sitting there, and he has these white, straight American style veneers on his teeth. And that's not what we Europeans consider aesthetic. So Professor Barman goes to him and says, oh yeah, because the first thing dentists do is look on the mouth of the patient. Don't worry, we can fix this. I'm sure we can find a very good solution for you. And the guy goes, no, I'm just waiting for my wife here. So he was perfectly happy with the situation. And this is what I mean. You as a dentist, you're making a suggestion, but the patient is making a decision. And you have to enable that. So we're going to look into this. The wax up is really giving you an idea of how to plan that. Also, to decide if maybe orthodontics are necessary to avoid overcutting of the teeth. And then, with the mock-up, the patient can make a very solid decision, yes, this is what I want. And that can then also work as the preparation template. Once you've cut the teeth, you do what's called a trial smile. Basically, it's another mock-up, but this mock-up will be refined to the extent where, at the end, you have the outcome that the patient says, this is exactly what I want. You don't do anything unless you get that perfect agreement. And then impression, light registration, cementation. That's the usual thing. And I find it interesting that very commonplace things that we do have a very profound impact on the patient. I mean, if you have a wax up from the lab, like this one, and you go to your patient and say, this is how we're going to do your teeth, then very likely the patient is going to say, I didn't want yellow teeth, because this is all they see. They have no idea what that wax up represents and what it does. So if you want to get an agreement with it, you want to get the patient into it, sometimes it's a lot easier to show them a thing like that, which is exactly the same information content, but differently presented. And this is Danielle. Danielle is the hairdresser actually of Ashton, where we saw that extreme makeover case. They do about 70% of the extreme makeover cases in the UK. But they treat regular persons. And Danielle walks by their practice every day when she walks to her hair salon. So that practice is sort of a, do you call it a souterrain? It's a little
when you flight down, on the flight to step.
not completely, like a half step.
Right.
So it's basically you're looking through a shop window into the waiting room area, which is very nice, bright colors, very aesthetic, looks great. And around that shop window, so to speak, is pictures, before and after pictures of patients. And she sees that. One day she decided, I want that too. I want to go in there, decide, see what they can do for me, what it costs and stuff like that. So what I do then is this mock-up. And that is compared to a previously taken Polaroid, can be a better picture, but you can do it differently too, depending on the equipment. But then you can already do a very precise prediction. The patient is going to do it all. And later on, I'm going to show you the second step when she is in her trial smart suite. So she decided she wants to do this. This is the provisional, but it is a provisional that is, or has taken a lot longer than the 10 minutes, 15 minutes that you usually take to make a provisional. This provisional took about 2 hours to make because it's completely refined. It has structures, it has surface texture, it has everything that makes it as close to the real thing as is possible. And with this trial smile, the patient is going home, show the new smile to everyone, the peers, the parents, the husband, whoever, and get feedback. And only when she says, this is exactly what I want, then they do the finals. And they even pay for this picture here. They pay a professional photographer to take this picture. They're not totally altruistic. They want the patient to take home good memories, so the patient gets actually a little booklet with steps of the treatment. Before picture, this picture. And do you notice something? White teeth, okay, yes, that's to be expected. New hairdo. And we have a Canadian dentist, Elliot Mechanic, very good speaker. If he ever comes to South Africa, I recommend that you go. Very entertaining. And Elliot Mechanic treats the Prime Minister's wife and a lot of movie celebrities and stuff like that in Canada. And he once wanted to sell us an advertising campaign. Change your hair with L'Occitane. We said, what? He said, yeah, happens all the time, especially with women. When we do this, they immediately go and change their hairdo, because this is also a personality change. And the easiest way to manifest that personality change with women is in your hairdo. Then you go and buy new shoes too, but that's a different story. So, meanwhile, Elliot Mechanic has very good connections to a coiffeur, so a hairstylist, and he recommends that. Says, if you want to, we have a special rate here at this hairstylist. But This picture is also, they get permission to use that picture for publications, for doing it in a shop window, for having it on the internet, for having it in a booklet where you can look into these before and after cases. And it's very important that it looks like this. I was in a practice in Singapore where also they had aesthetic dentistry right on the big sign on the door. And they had the same booklet. They had a booklet with before and after pictures, but they were all with these retracted smiles. And you can do that for your study club. That's perfect. But not for a patient. No patient wants to see this because it immediately transfers the image on, wow, there's a lot of ugly stuff they're going to do with me. I don't want that. So you want something like that. And the technique is pretty well known, actually. It's Pascal Magnier published on this as well. Great Pascal Magnier. What they want to achieve is basically very simple. You need to give the technician, and you have these discussions with your technician all the time, a certain material thickness. It depends on the ceramic you're going to use, so you have to make a decision on which ceramic you want to use, and then that results in a minimal ceramic thickness that you need to prepare the teeth for. And if you have a shape change, you can add 0.2 to 0.3 millimeters on top of that. So going from an A2 to an A1, that's one change. That is that one. So if you want to do that, you have to count the teeth. And this is one article here, but they are all the same. They all say the same. In any veneer situation, it is the most important thing to conserve as much enamel as you can, to be minimally invasive. And that has very good reasons. One, enamel is the more reliable bonding structure. If you bond to enamel, that's your safety deposit bank. That is going to work, and this is what you want. Anything is much more difficult. So what happens too is when you expose more dentin, you have a different flexing behavior. Even if the tooth is covered only with a thin layer of enamel, it behaves like a tooth that is completely covered in enamel. It's pretty stiff. If you expose about 20–30% of dentin, the flexing behavior changes. So if you have a tooth that flexes and you put a very stiff ceramic on top of it, then two things can happen. Worst case, ceramic breaks. Not so bad, the adhesive gives and you get discolorations on the margins. That's very common. And then there's a third thing that I personally think is very important, that Pascal Magnier says, when we're doing something like this, we don't have to think of the patient just right now. We have to think about the lifetime of the patient. When a young person like David here gets these veneers, they need to be replaced, say, in 20 years' time. And at that time, you still need that structure that gives you predictable, final, lasting results. So this is why you want to be minimally invasive. And the idea is pretty simple now. If you take the tooth as a reference, and you cut, say, 0.5 millimeters into the tooth, then you're either already pretty close to or already in dentin. But this is not what you're going to do. What you're going to do is, your preparation or your final volume is this, because you're putting something on it. It's typically that you've lost tooth structure, so you're replacing that. And if you take that as a reference and you cut 0.5 millimeters into that, then you may not even be touching enamel, or at least you're touching a minimal amount of enamel, and you're not into dentin. So this is the idea, and it's been published in this article. So what we do is we use a cutting template. We use this mock up, put it in the patient's mouth, and we cut through this. So what happens then is when you put the depth cutters through, when you remove it, you know exactly where to prepare the tooth. This is not the optimal thing, I know this, but I can show you that a little bit more here.
Important thing is, before you do that, you naturally need to have agreement that this is what you want to do. So when the patient comes in with a trial smile, you want to ask these two questions. What do you like about your new smile? What changes would you like me to do? Because right now, it's all a provisional. It's nothing. You can change everything. You can change line angles. You can change the structure. You can do all sorts of optical tricks to make that thing look different. And only when the patient says, this is exactly what I want, do you go and take an impression, send that off to your technician, and go on. Because otherwise, if you've already taken the impression, gotten the wonderful $50,000, maybe round, 50,000 round veneers in your drawer, and the patient says, I like it, but then you cringe because you know exactly. It's basically okay, but. So, I'd like to show you a little video by Erhard Friedrich. And I have one slight problem. It's not a technical problem, it's a law problem. I'm only allowed to use this video in DMG internal trainings. And the way I think of it is, can we agree that from now on we are in a DMG internal training? Right? Yeah? Can we? Okay. Because Erhard Friedrich, he's one of the godfathers of aesthetic dentistry, not only in Turkey, but in Europe, and even in the States. He lectures extensively, and he's very, very good. If you have a chance, go see him. And he said, I don't know why I didn't do this before. I had all the information. Instead, I made my life complicated. I used to take impressions of the mock-up, of the wax-up. I used to put these impressions in the patient's mouth and check with these onion shapes and see if I had cut enough or did have to cut more. If I had a good day, I would do a great preparation. If a bad day, the patient would use more structure than was necessary. But that wasn't necessary. I could have done it like this. And we're seeing here Erhard Friedrich doing a mock-up. And he does a direct mock-up in the patient's mouth. And he always starts with the incisal edge position of the central incisors. And from that on, he works his way down the corridor. And he only uses composite material. This is our Ecosphere material. His gloved hands and the spatula. This is all he needs. And he does this, what otherwise the lab does, because he's so good. He can create that vision in about 10-15 minutes. It's amazing to see him work like that. So he likes this composite because it handles nicely, it doesn't stick to the instrument and stuff like that. But I just want to show you this basically. And the patient is not numbed, he's always sitting upright. So you have a natural posture, and you can see this. And when he's cutting something here, he's just cutting a composite. The composite is not bonded onto the teeth, nothing. This is only to take a before and after photograph and have the patient decide on this before and after photograph, do I want it or not. If the patient doesn't immediately decide, they take an impression of this with status blue, store that for 5 years, and if the patient doesn't then decide, throw it away. But usually he says about 95% of my patients decide on this. Sometimes it takes a year or two because they don't have the money available at that moment. They need to find a way to finance it and stuff like that. But this is what they do. So you have a wax up in the end out of this. So you take an impression. You can correct anything here. If you cut away too much, put a floral on, light cure it. Very easy. If you want to change the shape, whatever. So the regular step is take a situational impression, send that to the lab and get a wax up. This is what's happening. This, by the way, is an alginate replacement material. So out of that, you take an impression from the wax up. There's a special reason why this is transparent. I don't want to go into this. Suffice it to say that this is taken from the wax up. So now he's transferring the wax up into the patient's mouth. This would be how you do it for a mock-up, but this is now going to serve as a cutting technique. You see what I mean with this. So, because this is only going to be Veneers, you don't have to fill up the whole matrix here. It would just create a lot of mess when you place that and a lot of excess material. There's actually very nice videos also to show you how you can do a very precise impression of this, and that will save you later on time with excess removal. But that's not necessary for here. This is, you don't care about excess in that stage for the cutting technique. So you place it on the patient's, in the patient's mouth, and the teeth have not been done anything. There's no spottage, nothing on the teeth. So you let the cure completely. It takes about 4 minutes, 3-4 minutes. And then you remove the template. So now you have the wax up in the patient's mouth. And now the patient is going to be, preparation is going to be cut, so the patient is numbed. And again, the patient has got a local anesthetic first, so that they don't even feel that she doesn't feel here the injection. As you can see, it's using a very regular depth cutter, just a wheel, where the difference between the outer diameter and the shaft here is 0.5 millimeters. And he's doing these 3 depth cuts through the laxative. And you really want to use laxative here, because other materials clog up your burr. They don't cut as nicely, they just make your life harder. So you do this, and to make it even more visible, you mark up these depth cuts. This is real time, by the way. This is, you can see how fast and efficient this is. You don't have to think about it. You just do 3 depth cuts. So then you mark it up with a soft lead pencil. Anything that's not water soluble here is okay. And what's missing then naturally too is the incisal edge reduction. And then I'll ask you to check. He's going to do the incisal edge reduction, but when we remove this cutting template, check what the cut marks are actually on the incisors. So again, he uses a burr, and when that burr is completely sunk into the laxative here, you have 1.5 millimeters of material, which is what the technician wants for the incisal edge, depending on the ceramic. So then the laxative is removed, and he uses a very light shade here, so that you have a good contrast to the tooth structure, and immediately you can see if there's any remnants. And I'll just stop the video in a few seconds to show you why this is such a great idea to do it this way. So you can see here, no cut marks. No cut marks mean exactly this. You don't cut that tooth. And on this tooth, you can see this area here, no cut marks, because this tooth is slightly bent inwards. You have enough thickness of material. As such, you don't need to cut the tooth. So with the rest here, I'm going to show you how he does the cutting procedure. And again, look, incisal edge position. There's basically very, very little that needs to be removed here, because that was already lost. There's lost tooth structure here. This is a 100 micron diamond. And again, this is real time. It's not changed anything. You can see how efficient you are then. You just have to follow naturally the curvature of the tooth. But other than that, you know exactly where to cut and how deep to cut to remove so much material that your technician is happy with you and doesn't come back and you have that discussion. You should have done more on that. So he then refines this with a fine diamond that's exactly the same shape, and then polishes it with an Arkansas stone that he has reshaped. Normally the Arkansas stone has this sharp angle, so he just takes an old diamond and cuts it so that it has the same shape as these here. So, and then with him it's usually associated with going from the loops to the operating microscope. So I'll forward that a little because we all get an idea of what's happening here, and I want to show you one more thing. So going from the loops to...
Did he do that for the video? He doesn't do that himself.
No, there is a video available. You can buy a video where he shows the technology.
Did he do this one for the video?
No, he doesn't.
These girls does. These girls does.
Yeah, sometimes. That's the beauty for him. He can have his associates, which are very good. They are long-term with the company. But because everyone knows exactly what to do, it's no problem. I mean, even I can do it, which says something. As I went to a course and I did it, took me way longer than it took him. I mean, that's also, you know, when you do it the first time, it's always new and different. But this is the polishing step, and what he does then is refining the preparation with a sonic cis instrument, and finally rounding off the edges with the soft textures. So this is basically the procedure. Forward that a little bit. Yeah, so I missed the suffix. That would be suffixes. And all of that is really very, very fast, very efficient, and very clean. By the way, if you're wondering, does he break the contact point? No, he doesn't break the contact point, except when he needs to have a shape change and needs more material on the surface. Then he will do it, but other than that, he doesn't. Or in this case, it was like she had in a second molar, unfortunately, very deep caries, as it turned out. So that went from a near to a half crown actually. So let's see a little bit of the impression he likes. Actually, the honeycomb. Oh, that was a bit too much. He takes 2 impressions with every patient, just because, for safety reasons. If anything happens with the impression, he still has a second one. And he likes the honeycomb because, especially in these Veneer situations, you have a very stable light body material that will become extremely flowable once you seat the tray. Yeah. So this is basically the Gallic-Weyl technique, and this is what I wanted to share with you because I think, again, going back, simplify your life. This is making your life a lot simpler. I must admit, though, that this only works if the teeth are within the perfect arch form. If they're outside of the perfect arch form, you would have to count the teeth or do ortho. Gallic-Weyl says, I do ortho. But this technique and this technology allows you a much more efficient and precise and less invasive cutting procedure than you would probably otherwise do. And I think this is what it's all about. This is finding ways where products and materials support you. No one can do the preparation for you. That's only you can do it. You can only do the treatment decision on what you want to achieve for this patient. And if a veneer is a good idea, or if he needs something else. So, but if you and the materials you choose work together, then dentistry can become a lot of fun and definitely less stressful. So that's what I would wish for you, get a less stressful situation.